You've probably heard me suggest for new investors to start investing in things that you either know, use, or love. And the reasoning is just because I find it much easier to be able to study a stock if it's a company that you actually enjoy their products or services. But I guess I should probably throw the warning in there that just because you love a company or their product doesn't necessarily make it the best investment. And you'll see what I mean by that during this video, because today we are talking about Weber. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Matt, and as always, before we get started here, I just need to say, not advice, don't take this as advice. If you need advice, speak to a financial advisor, but this is just for your entertainment purposes only, so do not make any investment decisions based solely on what I have to say here. And as always, if you hear something you like during this video, or if you found it informative, maybe even entertaining somehow, then I just ask that you consider hitting the like button, and if you haven't already, just subscribe as well. They're right next to each other, so it's not too much work. Anyway, as I mentioned during the intro, today we're going to be talking about Weber, the company that makes the grills. Now, the roots for Weber actually dates all the way back to sometime around 1892, but we'll go ahead and just fast forward to 1952 when they actually started selling the Weber kettles. And that was the first grill that they came out with. It went under a different name at the time. I think it was something like a Bayou or something along those lines. But as you can tell from this picture, the Weber kettles have come a long way since then. And since 1952, they've incorporated other types of grills into their lineup. So you are no longer committed to just the Weber kettle. You can also get grills that are propane grills. You can get portable grills. You can get electric ones. You can get smokers. You can even get a massively sized Weber kettle if you're into that. And they recently launched a pellet style smoker. Now, personally, I am a huge fan of the Weber kettle. I actually have two Weber kettles myself and have a small portable Weber kettle, and I use my kettles all of the time. Admittedly, I don't get to use them as much as I used to. I used to cook on my kettle about 5 days a week if, weather and schedule allowed for me to. So any opportunity I can to cook outside, I love being able to do so. Even if it's something that I can very easily do inside, cooking something in a pan, I just like being outside and cooking over a fire. It's a little bit more entertaining to me. And I do think it was the versatility of this grill that really drew me into wanting to purchase my first Weber kettle, which was about 4 years ago. As I mentioned, I really just enjoy cooking outside and cooking over fires, or coals for that matter. But I also really enjoy just kind of experimenting or playing around with other different cooking styles. And I was attracted to the idea that with the Weber kettle, I can essentially just buy attachments or accessories if I wanted to try other cooking methods without needing to go out and buy a completely new grill for that application. And I'll show you some of the food that I was able to make just on my Weber kettle, but also I want to mention some of the attachments that you're able to get for a Weber kettle. Would be a rotisserie attachment. You can make it into a pizza oven. You can get a Santa Maria attachment, which is that grill that raises and lowers over the fire. Of course, you can always do direct grilling on this. They also even make griddle plates for them in case you don't have like a Blackstone or want one of those like hibachi style tops for your Weber kettle. And some of them even have a propane assist in case you are nervous or apprehensive about using only charcoal, because admittedly, it is a lot easier just to turn on a propane grill and let it run than it is to start a thing of charcoals. Or if you have a kettle just sitting there but don't really like the idea still of using charcoal, well, they actually now even make a pellet attachment for your standard Weber kettle grill, which is kind of a cool idea. So now you know why I love this company, but let me go ahead and talk about why this might not be the best investment for you, and we'll start off by taking a look at some of their numbers. Now, before I get started here with the numbers, I should also just mention that this company is very new to the public markets. I want to say it's only been either this week or last week that they actually did hit the public markets. Now, as many of you know, I don't typically like to invest in IPOs, but it is a company that I love, which is why I'm pretty interested in the stock itself. And we'll also be doing a comparison this week for this stock, and we'll be comparing it to Traeger. Now, if you're not familiar with Traeger, they're probably the leading brand in pellet smokers. I know that's basically what they specialize in, and they seem to have been doing it or have been around a little bit longer than most others. Admittedly, I've never cooked on a pellet style smoker before. I understand the concept of it, and as my schedule tends to get busier and busier, it definitely seems like something that'd be beneficial to have. But I do firmly believe in, when I make barbecue, I enjoy the actual aspect of like starting a fire, managing a fire for, 6, 8, sometimes 12 hours just to get the food done. And a pellet grill kind of takes away from that experience, but again, I definitely understand not everybody wants to be maintaining a fire for 12 hours or having to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to start a brisket so you can actually eat it by 8 o'clock that night. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these numbers. So probably Comes as no surprise, but Weber's market cap is about double what it is for Traeger. Again, we're only talking $6 billion compared to $3 billion, which isn't really a dramatic difference between these two. But to me, it actually makes sense because Weber does have a lot more extensive of a product lineup, as well as offers, I believe, more accessories than what Traeger has. So we're going to do the enterprise value to sales this week for the first metric that we'll take a look at. And remember, for an enterprise value to sales, we like to see that number between 1 and 3, which Weber does sit between. Traeger sits outside of that at 6.08, and admittedly, there wasn't a whole lot of valuation metrics for us to be able to look at for either of these companies, but I would say for what it's worth, that definitely makes it look like Traeger could be an overvalued company. Now, I almost didn't include a PE ratio this week just because some sources didn't have it, others did, but this is probably the lowest PE ratio I have ever seen, and I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. As we could see, Weber has a PE ratio of 0.08. Again, we've looked at companies that have PE ratios over 500 before, and as we could see with Traeger, not every company even has a PE ratio. Now, the reason why I say this might not be the best thing is because I think it's important to look at a company like this, and while yes, they do check some of the valuation metrics, it could be a value trap. And by that I mean, sometimes the stock can look like it isn't undervalued, which most people would assume is a good buying opportunity, but they might not be doing anything that's exciting or a great way to help grow their sales. And I think that's even further reflected in this revenue growth of only being around 17.67%. Again, pretty impressive still for a company that's really been just selling grills since 1952 to still actually have positive revenue growth year over year. But that being said, I'm sure a lot of this actually has to do with the fact that they, last year I believe it was, released their pellet smoker and they're coming out with like electric grills and whatnot. As well as they also tend to release new colors and additions and whatnot, I guess, to help increase that revenue growth. Nonetheless, though, this to me does look like a little bit of a value trap because it is considered an undervalued stock, but the revenue growth isn't really doing anything to make me think that this could help grow the stock itself, if that makes sense. Traeger actually has a pretty solid revenue growth of 50.22%. And again, to my knowledge with Traeger, I'm sure they have like gloves and other accessories you can buy. But for the most part, they just make pellet grills. That's what they do. That's what they're in the business of. Sure, they have different sizes. I think they even have one that looks like a pig, which is kind of funny. But ultimately, that is impressive to see that they're able to grow revenue by just simply selling pellet grills. And lastly here for the quick ratio, we have 2.14 for Weber and Traeger has 1.85. It's worth mentioning Weber does have a lot of long-term debt. So while that number of 2.14 is great, I am a little curious to know why exactly do they carry so much long-term debt on their balance sheet. So that's just something else I haven't really had the chance to look into. Again, we don't have much that we can really base this off of, given that they are brand new to the public markets. And honestly, I didn't even look into what Traeger's balance sheet actually looks like. So it's just worth mentioning that while these numbers look great, they do have a lot of long-term debt, and that's something that I would like to see be paid down in the future to help make this look like a little bit healthier of a balance sheet. And just taking a look at Simply Wall Street, we do also see that this stock is undervalued by about 20%. Again, that's only about a almost $5 margin between the two of them. Nothing substantial, and I really would, if you are strongly considering adding this stock to your portfolio, just take into consideration or be cognizant of the possibility of this being more of a value trap than it is a value play stock. Now, as many of you know, I obviously think that looking at these numbers plays a very important factor when it comes to making a decision of if this is worth buying or adding to your portfolio. But I also think it's almost as important to just understand the company itself, or it's equally as important to understand the company itself, because there might be some kind of opportunity in the future that might make this a more interesting or intriguing company to have inside of your portfolio, or it can just give us a better understanding as to, why is this valued the way it is, but revenue growth hasn't been growing. And unfortunately, actually, let me back up here. When I like to look at companies, there's really two things that I like to look at first to understand if this is a stock that's really worth my time researching. And I said this many times before, but the two things I really like to look out for is, do they have some form of like a subscription payment that they'll receive, or just some kind of consistent recurring source of revenue? And the other one is, does this company provide a product or service that allows for others to create their own business and make their own money from this? And for Weber, I would say the answer to both of those is yes and no, but leaning more towards no. And let me explain that. So when it comes to the recurring source of revenue, you can make the argument that if people are using their pellet smoker and tend to stick using to just their pellets for their grill, then in theory people will have to buy those once they run out, and then that might be able to create a more frequent purchase than it would be if they were just solely dependent on selling the grills itself. But that being said, I would argue that that's not what I would consider a recurring source of revenue because it's not on a consistent basis. And grilling, using smokers, whatever, tends to be more of a seasonal activity, especially if you live up north. Now, yes, I am the person that will be outside cooking on a charcoal grill when it's, 30 degrees outside just because I really do enjoy it that much. But for most people, once it comes, that late fall, early winter, all the way up until spring, a lot of times people just throw the cover on their grill and don't see it until the next summertime. So I understand where people make the argument that pellets can help this generate revenue more consistently. I just kind of disagree with that being a reliable source of income. And as for making a business with their products, I mean, sure, we can in theory say that, people out on the competition circuit do use the Weber Smoky Mountain and do very well with that product. And if you do very well in these barbecue competitions, then you actually can make some pretty substantial money doing so. And I guess if you wanted to, you could take something like the Weber Ranch kettle, I think is what it's called. It's the massive Weber kettle, and use that for something like a catering business. But again, for that, I would make the argument that most people out on the competition circuit tend to use more higher end smokers like a Jambo or even like a Gateway drum smoker. And when it comes to catering, I think a lot of times people that do that stuff still prefer maybe something that provides them more consistent results or something that's more repeatable, like an electric smoker that might include like real wood to use, or just something that again will help them provide more consistent results, because admittedly when you do use charcoal, your results are going to fluctuate because there's a lot more factors that are involved. I can see where people would say yes to both of those questions that I asked, but in my opinion, I would say no, which again makes this a less attractive stock to me. Now, one other thing I didn't mention is that they do have this new system coming out. I believe they call it Weber Connect. And I don't even think it's out yet or in the public market. But essentially what it is, it's like a system that connects to your phone where if you're starting to run low on propane, it like sends you out a new tank of propane. So you never have that issue of starting the grill and then realize you don't have any gas left. And I get it. That's cool and all. And I guess that's somehow what they're saying will be a subscription base where they'll be able to generate that recurring source of revenue. But I just don't really love the idea of just everything having to connect with your phone or having all this dependency on like it's going to send it to you. Just because once we start adding all those bells and whistles to this, then more things tend to break. And that means that you're going to have to buy more grills. And I'm just not really a huge fan of that stuff. Again, as somebody who really just enjoys using the Weber kettle itself. So this might be the most negative outlook I've had on a Watchlist Wednesday video. I know I've talked bad about other stocks before, but nonetheless, this is Watchlist Wednesday, and this is going to be a stock that I want to add to the portfolio. Again, while this is never advice, so don't take anything I say here as advice, I'm only adding this because this is paper trading money and it doesn't actually count. I just really love this company and it's only trading at like $19 a share, so it's not like it's going to make or break the bank with this paper trading account. But if this is a company you're considering, then I would just, again, caution you to make sure that you're not falling into a value trap and you understand that they do not have very reliable or consistent sources of revenue. Sure, they sell a ton of grills, but that can change and that can be easily influenced by like market conditions, seasons, all of that good stuff. And I like to stay away from companies that are influenced by, is it fall or summer, or if the economy were to go down, people stop buying all these grills and everything. I'm just not into that as an investment. But nonetheless, I'm going to go ahead and add it to the portfolio. So let me go ahead and get that pulled up and I'll be right back with you. All right, so I bought 60 shares of Weber, which sounds like a lot, but it only came out to a market value of, I think at the time it was like around $1,100 or so. So not much considering I usually put in around $5,000 into these investments. And I'm glad I didn't do the full $5,000 because we are currently down $64.80 total. So just for those numbers, I bought 60 shares at $18.90, and it's currently trading around $17.82. So we are losing money on this position already. Again, kind of expected. I don't expect this one to do well for the portfolio, but I just love this company so much that I would struggle not having it inside of it here. Anyway, let's take a look at a few highlights for some of the other stocks. First off, this might be the highest this portfolio has done, specifically this one, because we are now at over a $5,000 gain. I think last week we were at like a $2,000 or $3,000 gain, so we've definitely come a long way in a week. Blackstone and Shopify still leading that charge, and Microsoft is actually doing very well for us. One thing I noticed too is Tesla is finally making us money. And now that they're making us money, I don't necessarily want to sell the position, but I probably will, just to lock in those gains and not really have to worry about experiencing that same volatility like we did, a month or so ago. To my surprise, the two stocks that really seem to be weighing down this portfolio, though, are Jumia and Roblox. I thought those would do a little bit better for us, but I don't know. We'll just hold on to them and hopefully they'll be able to make a rebound like some of these other positions have for us. But it actually looks like we finally have a decent amount more stocks performing well for us than the ones that are losing us money. So I am still, as I think I say every week, pretty happy with the way this portfolio has been turning out for us. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Weber. I'd love to know what you think about this company. If you agree with me or if it's a stock that you want to add, please leave that in the comment section down below. And remember, if you like this video, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button for me. And if you haven't subscribed already, I just ask that you consider doing so. Eventually, one day I'll stop asking, but for the time being, I still need to ask. I'm so close to 2,000 subscribers already, so if you don't mind trying to help me reach that goal, I'd greatly appreciate it. All that said, though, I'm going to wrap up here, so thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're right here with me, and I really appreciate that. But I'll let you go ahead, enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next time.